Yeah, back to the Gilets jaunes, or the yellow vest protests, in fact, with Brian, who's joining us here in the studio for the business news. Brian, Emmanuel Macron, he's meeting with unions and employers this morning, isn't he, ahead of addressing the nation later on. And officials and trade associations, they're really warning still, aren't they, that the economic impact of this is going to be severe.
That's right. French finance minister, in fact, Bruno, Maire, has called the protests an economic catastrophe. He's just said they could cost about 0.1% in growth in the final quarter of this year and affect foreign investment. Well, while it is still too early to put exact figures on just how much damage has been done, estimates are beginning to come out. French hoteliers have said their reservations are down 15 to 20% since the start of the unrest. Maire himself said last week that even before the latest round of protests, restaurants had seen their sales drop some 20 to 50%. And the French Association of Small and Medium Businesses has said it expects the protests to end up costing its members some 10 billion euros. Well, the protests coming during the critical holiday shopping season isn't helping matters. Maire put a point on that during a visit to vandalized shops in Paris on Sunday.
I think it's very bad news for the French economy, very bad news for business owners, very bad news for small and medium-scale businesses, for artisans, for all those who counted on their year-end sales to bring in higher revenues and maybe to pay their employees better. That won't be possible.
Well, next, the U.S. says it's setting a hard deadline in trade negotiations with China. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping's 90-day truce on new tariffs is intended to give the U.S. and China breathing room to negotiate a broad, lasting trade agreement, as Washington seeks structural reforms from Beijing to bring down a massive trade deficit and address widespread complaints of intellectual property theft. Well, complicating the situation recently is the arrest of Chinese tech giant Huawei's chief financial officer in Canada at the request of U.S. authorities, that on accusations of violating U.S. sanctions on Iran. China says the U.S. and Canada are running what it calls a show trial to humiliate China for challenging U.S. tech dominance. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer on Sunday acknowledged that tension, but said it shouldn't affect trade talks. Here he is.
I view that it shouldn't really have much of an impact. I can understand from the Chinese perspective how they would see it that way. This is a criminal justice matter. It is totally separate from anything that I work on or anything that the trade policy people in the administration work on. So for us, it's unrelated. It's criminal justice.
Well, time to check in on the markets now. Asian indexes losing ground in Monday trade as the latest trade data out of China shows significantly weaker than expected imports and exports for November. Those trade fears, of course, continuing to weigh on markets worldwide as well. The Nikkei in Tokyo down over 2%. Shanghai Composite on the mainland down right around 0.8%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng around 1.33% off, and the Kospi in Seoul off just over 1% so far today. Next, as the British Parliament prepares for Tuesday's vote on Theresa May's Brexit agreement, the prospect of the UK crashing out of the EU with no deal in place is looming larger than ever. That scenario would inevitably slow or even halt the flow of goods at the border. And while some companies in the UK have begun stockpiling for that eventuality, many can't afford to. And even those that can are finding warehouse space in short supply. Ivana Scatola has the story.
With less than 4 months to go until Britain leaves the EU, British businesses are trying to prepare for the unknown. Many are stockpiling goods because they're worried imports of raw material will be disrupted in the event of a no-deal Brexit. But small businesses such as the grown-up company, which makes chocolate, don't have the time or money to do that. James Ecclestone, the firm's founder, is concerned about what will happen to his company if a no-deal does go ahead.
The no-deal scenario really scares me. I mean, chocolate can't stop. It's got to keep moving the whole time. I'm also worried that we might get a situation that we sometimes get with Japan and the US, in so much as you get unseen protectionism. Regulations are strictly enforced, we're no longer part of the club, and goods can get rejected perhaps more easily.
Even if businesses can afford to stockpile, storage space in the country is running out. The government has even had to request more space be built for storing medication. Robert Hardy is the director of a warehouse company and says he's noticed the surge in demand.
Cold storage facilities are not facilities you can throw up overnight. They're complicated structures with they have to be very robust and very secure in terms of their temperature management.
Leaving the EU without a deal would create huge delays at the border due to new checks on customs and regulations. For British businesses, preparation has been frustrated by the fact that they won't know the terms of any post-Brexit trade deal until close to the March 29th departure date.
That's France 24's Ivana Scatola. Finally, for business, we turn to the Grand Duchy with the small population. With just 110,000 permanent residents, Luxembourg sees some 190,000 foreigners commuting into the capital for work daily, that leading to some of the worst traffic congestion in the world. Well, in a bid to improve upon that, the country is now set to become the first in the world to make all public transportation free. Lost ticket sales, probably not a huge concern for prosperous Luxembourg. Its transport system costs around 491 million euros per year to run. Tickets bring in only about 40 million. Fares for trains, trams, and buses will all be scrapped by early 2020. The move is expected to reduce not just traffic congestion, but air pollution as well. Nice little story there, Stuart.
Interesting. Well, I hope it works. You never know. Perhaps it can be adopted elsewhere if it does.
They've done it in Estonia. It's actually been quite a success. Tallinn, not the whole country, but just Tallinn.
We shall see. We shall see. Thank you very much, Brian. Brian with the business news for you on France 24 there.